Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into today's deep dive on Arctic LNG. We have chosen this topic because Arctic 2 isn't just any project. It's set to be one of the biggest new additions to LNG supply and overall capacity in 2024. So it's one of the most anticipated and closely watched developments of the year. The US sanctions have thrown plenty of obstacles in its path, and it's created a significant risk to our 2024 forecast. But despite these hurdles, we've also recently uncovered that there have been two of the so-called dark loadings at the plant. And today we're going to peel back the layers of this fascinating story. So I'm thrilled to have Petr Todorov with us today. As the head of the data science at Kepler, he's going to shed light on how his team detected these loadings and share some insights into the signal tampering we've recently been seeing, also known as the IIS spoofing. And for those who don't know me, I'm Anna Subasic. I'm a market analyst here at Kepler Insight, and I specialize in natural gas and LNG. I'll be guiding you through the wider implications of Arctic 2 to global markets and what we can expect as we move forward. So our journey today will start with the background leading up to the recent startup and the arrival of Train 2, followed by an exploration of the spoofing tactics and satellite imagery. And then finally, we'll discuss our outlook for the future of this project. So let's dive in. Located on the Gedan Peninsula in Russia's Siberian region, Arctic 2 is a major export project that is basically aiming to tap into the natural gas reserves in the Arctic. In fact, it's the third large capacity LNG export project to start up in Russia. And this was imagined as a 3-train facility, with each train at 6.6 MTPA capacity. However, at present, only one train is operational with a single line of production that is online. Capacity is at present reduced to around 50%, as one of the previously installed Baker Hughes turbines from the US is in need of replacement. And of course, now replacing this turbine will be hard given the ongoing US imposed sanctions that are in place since November. But most recently, we did see the modules for Train 2 arriving just at the weekend, which once operational should be running at full capacity. What is particularly interesting about this plant is also the location. Because it's situated very high up north in Siberia, for a large part of the year, the plant is relying on specialized ice class carriers, which are called ARC-7s, to kind of navigate the frozen waters of the Northern Sea route. And these carriers play a pivotal role for the project because they are strategic assets that enable the project to operate in one of the world's most harshest environments and conditions. So their role is indispensable in terms of maintaining the flow of LNG from the remote Arctic locations to the global LNG market, especially so for Asia. And Russia is essentially the only global player that is in need of these vessels. And of course, the availability of these vessels has been a major bottleneck in the project and its and how it proceeds. So we'll get into why a bit later on. But what we are seeing is that despite these hurdles, we believe that production has restarted and that these recent loadings won't be isolated cases for the year. So let's now discuss the timeline of the project leading up to where we are currently. As you might know, the project was hit with sanctions last November. They were imposed by the US Department of State, and they targeted Novatek as well as Novatek-related entities in an effort to basically limit all future Russian expansions that might help fund the ongoing war efforts in Ukraine. Any interaction with sanctioned entities would mean falling on the US SDN list and limitations to transactions in dollars or using of the big SWIFT banking system. So essentially, this was the declaration of sanctions was followed by project operator Novatek declaring force majeure on all of its contracts and all the foreign shareholders of the project essentially pulling out. Despite these sanctions, the plant has set up Train 1 back in August and started producing LNG in December, but didn't ship its first cargo up until 8 months later. Around 2 months after the start of production, LNG tanks were likely full. And around the same time, we saw that there was an attempt to transfer one of the completed ARC-7s from Korea to a UAE-based entity, which essentially failed. And consequently, a few months later, Novatek had lowered production significantly because without ARC-7s, there cannot be winter exports. However, most recently, on July 30, we saw that satellite images of Russia's sanctioned plant revealed that the flaring tower had indeed restarted, and we believe this to be a major flaring event. This essentially made us believe that production has restarted and will not be ramped back down anytime soon because this would cause serious damage to reservoirs. We also know that ARC-7s aren't ready or transferred as of yet, so that poses the question of what kind of carriers do we see loading this sanctioned product. So to show the work around these sanctions, let's look at the kind of carriers that we are talking about. In order to kind of work around the sanctions, the carriers must be held under foreign jurisdiction and provably not related to Novatek. Also, during the summer, while the area around Arctic is largely ice-free, the loadings can be done aboard conventional carriers and they can be accompanied by nuclear icebreakers. For some time now, Kepler has been tracking a number of vessels, which we have highlighted in our spotlight report and as evident in this table here, that have kind of recently changed ownership to obscure UAE or Indian-based entities. Now, these are mostly vessels that were built some time ago and are ready to go out of commission in a few years, so they won't necessarily be contaminated for future use in the event that they are sanctioned. They mostly have ownership or ship management connected to UAE-based NUR Global Shipping or related subsidiaries which act as shell-like companies. These vessels don't need to have permits for the Northern Sea route because they can perform STS in international waters or take the longer way around to reach final destination. So the first two dark loadings, which we have identified at Kepler, have been aboard the Pioneer and the Asia Energy, which are the first two sister vessels that you can see listed in this table here. We have been tracking the rest of these vessels and believe that they have been using signal manipulation tactics to report false IES positions and then load cargoes under the radar and in a non-transparent manner. This is where I'll kind of hand over to Petar, who will walk us through the ways that we identify and monitor these loadings using satellite imagery.
Thank you, Anna. At Kepler, we indeed are scrutinizing the trajectories of all ships and try to systematically to verify the positions of ships as soon as we can. For this, we use a combination of anomaly detection over the kinematic properties of the trajectory that is reported by the ship, and also verification on satellite imagery. Now, if you see this map here, we are going to tell you a story with this map how we have detected the dark protocol of Asia Energy. Here you see with a thin blue line the trajectory of Asia Energy as we have received it in Kepler with the bias of our ground stations. And every time you see a blue pin, this means that the reported AIS position falls within the range of a satellite image. Now, what does this mean? That we take this position, we know that it is within the range of a satellite image, and we look at it. And what do we see? We see a ship that looks like Asia Energy, specifically has the same dimensions, the same green hull, and the four spheroidal features, reservoirs on the top of the hull. Now, there is no doubt that this is Asia Energy, since this is where exactly she has to be. The question is now, can we track the whole trajectory of the ship? Well, we can with some with some error, of course. And what are the main hurdles? The main hurdles is, of course, the weather. Here you can see a second image, an optical satellite image from Sentinel-2 constellation. On this image, we cannot see the ship where she reports to be because of clouds. However, given the smooth, regular nature of this trajectory, we don't believe that the ship was spoofing her positions at this time. Also, we go up, and what we see, all positions in blue are positions beforehand the dark port call, and all positions in red are positions after the dark port call. So we have some other positions here. Once again, the same ship very nicely fits the self-reported AIS positions. So satellite and AIS data are consistent. Now, we go to this area over there when we can see that Asia Energy has some pretty weird trajectory. And let's see. This is very probably a spoofed trajectory, but how we can possibly confirm this? We can confirm this, of course, with the satellite imagery that have been taken by the Sentinel constellation over those positions. And we see here, oh, we are not lucky because on the 7th of August, it was under the clouds. On the 7th of August again under the clouds. What do we see here? On the 10th of August, we see an optical image at 10:05 universal coordinated time, and we don't see a ship. What we have done is every time a ship has to be in a satellite image, we run a machine learning computer vision model that does object detection, more specifically ship detection, and tell us whether, yes or no, there is a ship on this image. We have looked about all images that we have from that area at this moment, and we don't find a ship on this image. This means only one thing. So every time the ship reports to be in a certain position, there is a satellite image over it. We see the ship, but not this time. And this is not a single case in this area. We also can find at least one other, okay, this one. This position is also a position for which we don't see the ship where she should be. And this is a Sentinel-1. This means a radar image. Now, what do we see 1,000 kilometers away and less than 24 hours than this self-reported position at this station? So here is Arctic LNG 2. And what we see is another position that has been obtained through satellite imagery. We see a ship, but no ship is reporting to be on Arctic LNG 2. But we clearly identify Asia Energy on this ship by her dimensions, her green hull, and 4 spheroidal reservoirs. Now, this is less than 24 hours than the last reported AIS position of Asia Energy, more than 1,000 kilometers away. This makes us clearly conclude that those positions here are not real. They're not realistic first, but they're also not real. Now, the green positions are after, the red positions are after her dark port call. We again don't see her for some time until the 14th of August. And now, after the 14th of August, the first moment Asia Energy appears on satellite imagery is this radar image on the 18th of August 2024. Radar images are a little bit more difficult to interpret because we don't see the features clearly, we don't see the color, but we can indeed deduce the dimensions of the ship from this image. So we are concluding that Asia Energy made a dark port call in Arctic LNG 2 and started spoofing around the 9th of August and ended spoofing at most at the 18th of August, if not before. Most probably, this very regular trajectory is not a spoofed trajectory. Now, satellite imagery can tell us even more about the past of a given installation. And an even easier case is to look at the static point over the ground, where we know where the bounding boxes of our polygons of interest are. Here we are at Arctic LNG 2, and we can pinpoint the exact moment of arrival of train 1, which is, you can see, train 1 has almost arrived in Arctic LNG 2 on the 12th of August 2023 and was attached to the terminal on the 13th of August 2023. Then, as Anna has mentioned, it took to the installation several months to start operation. So what we see here on this slide is that the arrival of train 2 has been followed on satellite imagery as well. On the left-hand side, we see for satellite image of train 2 arriving near Arctic LNG 2, just 150 kilometers northwest of the target installation. And on the next day, on the 16th of August 2024, train 2 was just 43 kilometers northwest of Arctic LNG 2, accompanied by at least 3 tugboats. Next slide. Asia Energy did a very similar pattern to what another LNG carrier, Pioneer, did just a week ago. So here you see Pioneer's trajectory beforehand, her dark port call in blue again. So the starting date of this trajectory is the 14th of July. After her dark port call, you see the trajectory in red, and every pin again is a satellite image with which the presence of the ship at this particular position could be verified. Now, if we zoom in the zone in the Barents Sea west of Novaya Zemlya, we see a very unrealistic pattern. Now, is this pattern not only unrealistic but also unreal? We are going to apply the same methodology. We are going to check the satellite images. And now, if we dwell on one of the points, what do we see here? We see a satellite image. We see the reported location of Pioneer in blue. And what do we see? We see no ship on the image. No computer vision algorithm can find a ship. Of course, this image is, the dimensions of this image are several hundred by several hundred kilometers. Hence the need of sophisticated machine learning algorithms in order to detect ships around this trajectory. So the previous satellite image was taken on the 28th of July, 2024. Now you see that just a few days later, the ship is again 1,000 kilometers away, calling Arctic LNG 2, and next to the jetty, next to train 1, we can clearly identify Pioneer, again, by her dimensions, by the fact that she is spoofing in the Barents Sea, and next to the LNG installation. What we also can notice is that this is near infrared imagery, showing that there is a excessive heat, an outburst of heat, so a flaring event that, as Anna has mentioned, this event is characteristic of restart of the production. Once again, after the spoofing event has ended, predictably, Pioneer reappeared on satellite imagery on the 7th of August. Hence, once again, we have a very reasonable estimate of the beginning and the end of the spoofing events, and what we have detected as an unrealistic pattern turned out to be an unreal pattern of AIS positions conferred by satellite imagery, and the ships have been found in Arctic 2 LNG loading their cargo, their sanctioned cargo.
Thank you, Peter. We'll be moving on to our LNG forecast bit of this webinar. So we can start by mentioning the immediate movements of the two vessels that we have been tracking. As we mentioned, Kepler has been tracking the Pioneer and Asia Energy and a number of other vessels that are highlighted in this report that we have put out, which have recently changed ownership to obscure foreign-based entities. It is unclear as of right now whether the cargoes on board have been sold and who the buyers are. This is because we know that all off-takers have pulled out of Arctic 2 late last year because of Western sanctions. But we also know that Novatek is expected to sell these cargoes on a spot basis and at a discount, which makes them particularly attractive to buyers that have limited financial resources. In terms of where these vessels might be going, it is unclear as of now what the final destination for these two vessels might be. But Pioneer seems to be positioned to enter the Houthi-controlled Red Sea passage, much like its sister ship Asia Energy had done several weeks ago, and was the one to actually cross first since January. As for Asia Energy, it is still too early to tell where it is going, but we could assume that it would take the same trajectory as Pioneer. You can track these vessels in real time on our terminal map. And another thing to kind of take into account who the buyers would be for these volumes. Well, they're primarily anticipated to be heading towards emerging markets in Asia, and to players which do not have existing associations or offtake agreements with US suppliers. We know that recently Novatek set up a marketing office earlier this year in China. So that could be one parallel, but there is another parallel to draw with other commodity markets. Other countries such as Turkey or Egypt could also consider purchasing Russian LNG, but it is worth, however, noting that many of the LNG receiving terminals are operated by state-owned entities or private companies that would not want to have any such risks with sanctioned entities. I think it's also important to note that we do not believe that any of these loadings will discharge in the EU27, because those players especially will not risk interacting with these sanctioned entities. Now, let's move on to talk about our total export expectations for 2024. Currently, Arctic 2 can load up to a maximum of 4 cargoes per month up until November, based on what we know are its existing production rates. As the Northern Sea route gradually closes, the project will then rely entirely on the ARC-7 vessels. Now, winter is posing the greatest risk to this project, and this is where we see the most potential for variation in the export forecast. Our base case, however, assumes that there will be 3 ARC-7 vessels available by the end of the winter, with LNG exports reaching up to 1.2 MT in 2024. The new generation of ARC-7s, they're capable of transiting the NSR all year round, could potentially head directly to Asia with a round trip, for example, to northern China. This would take approximately 40 days for a round trip. Alternatively, these vessels could perform STS transfers with conventional tankers in Russian waters, but outside of the icy areas. The biggest variability to kind of highlight in our forecast is in Q4. In our downside scenario, no ARC-7s are transferred, while the upside includes up to 4 ARC-7s in service this winter. But now let's discuss which of these ARC-7s could be entering service this winter and what candidates we see moving forward. So the Northern Sea route and the area around the plant will begin to ice up around October up until June. And the ARC-7 vessels, which are heavily reinforced for year-round operations, they're capable of navigating this thick ice on their own. But most of them are built in advanced shipyards in South Korea, with some that are assembled domestically in Russia. South Korea is the leader in constructing these new generation ice-capable LNG vessels, but they are not the only country with the expertise. However, because of the ongoing US sanctions with Russia, Korean shipbuilders are hesitant to work with sanctioned entities, and as the leaders in this industry, Russia has a real problem with getting these ships over. So to avoid ending up on the SDN list, they require a transfer of ownership to an entity that is under non-Russian jurisdiction, so not directly related to Novatek. Realistically, the vessels that you see listed here are the most ideally posed to enter service in 2024 or beginning 25. And especially if you take a look at the first three ones, which are the Hanwha Ocean-built ones. Three of these vessels, they were initially ordered by Russian shipping company Sovcomflot, but they had to be completed by Hanwha Ocean because of the sanction-related payment issues. And earlier in the year, there was a failed attempt, as I mentioned, to transfer one of these, so Piotr Kapica, to a new entity in Dubai. It was intended that the nature of this transaction was confidential, but this was compromised and it led to the reversal of the transaction back to Hanwha Ocean in mid-February. After this, market participants basically assumed that the momentum for such transfers had completely ceased, but Kepler Insight anticipates that there will be new efforts to transfer these three Hanwha Ocean vessels to foreign entities, as the company, as we have seen, is becoming increasingly adept to navigating these sanctions and its legal loopholes. The last three Hanwha ordered vessels were ordered by Mitsui or MOL. Currently, one of these three vessels, Ilya Mechnikov, is a possible candidate to enter into service in 2024 because that one has undergone sea trials and gas trials. Lastly, there are some vessels that, as I mentioned, are being assembled domestically in Russia at the Zvezda shipyard. These vessels were made in collaboration with Samsung Heavy Industries, which has stopped working with Novatek since the sanctions took place. The most advanced of these are Alexei Koshkin and Pyotr Stepin. They have succeeded in getting all the major components installed, but they still rely on Chinese counterparts and also the re-engineering of some parts from other ARC-7s, such as Sergei Bite, to complete works and basically start the sea trials to be able to enter into service. Novatek has deployed nearly 200 personnel on site to expedite this process and re-engineer all the missing parts. And they expect Alexei Koshkin and Pyotr Stepin to enter service at the end of 24 and beginning of 25. However, we believe that there could be further delays, with Alexei Koshkin forecast to enter in service as of early 25 and Pyotr in Q2 of 25. That is contingent upon the re-engineering and replacement of parts and whether that is successful. Now, moving on to look ahead to 2025. So our base case scenario forecasts that exports could reach up to 4.8 MT in 2025. In the first half of the year, we could see the addition of two more ARC-7s, which I kind of mentioned are the Zvezda ones, bringing the total up to 6 ARC-7s. This could increase vessel capacity and loading, presuming from mid-25 when the Northern Sea route kind of reopens. Train 2 is scheduled to come online in early Q3 of 2025, as we saw it just arrived, and it would double the plant's capacity to 13.2 MTPA. We assume that Train 2 will operate at near full capacity, unlike Train 1, which I mentioned is currently limited to 50%. And we expect an average of 9 cargoes per month during the summer months from July to November. This is assuming that once the NSR opens up, conventional cargoes will be able to load again. However, as the NSR becomes icebound again, exports will then decline to 5 to 6 cargoes per month due to the ongoing limited availability of ARC-7 vessels. If you've been following market news recently, you might see that modules for Train 3 had almost arrived from the Chinese shipyard, but were turned around and recalled before reaching final destination. And Kepler Insight has not included Train 3 in our forecasts, and for now believes that the Train 3 is suspended indefinitely. It is also important to note that a lot of this hinges on the availability of ARC7, so there's a lot of upside and downside to this. This webinar is based on our LNG Spotlight report. It's one of our regular monthly reports that is centered around an interesting topic in the market that we're seeing. To find more detail and a deeper dive into this topic, be sure to check it out. And let's just briefly talk about our offering as well. So, as I said, this was just a sneak peek into our LNG and natural gas insight offering. We offer comprehensive coverage of the global markets, the European and the US markets, including daily news coverage, 18 months out, supply, demand, and price forecasts, a weekly report as well for a more short-term outlook, and specialized monthly reports, including the LNG monthly, the natural gas monthly, and as I mentioned, the LNG Spotlight. So you can request access today using the QR code below, and you can reach out if you have any questions, which we'd be more than happy to follow up on. So have a great day, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in.